Afternoon, America. Brian James Lamb here. I want to welcome you back to another episode of What the Fuck's Up. As I said yesterday at lunch with George, I was going to do an episode today about sort of what took place in 2020 generically and where we're looking and some of the important facts that have come out regarding the 2024 election, what we've learned there, and where we need to continue digging, where we're looking, and where, of course, in Maricopa County, your local elections officials are moving things away so that people can't see what's happening within these certain repositories of information. And so basically what I've got here is a graph, Arizona voter history graph, that looks at both Arizona voter registration, the blue bars are Arizona voter registration over time, 2008, 2012, 2016, 2020, 2024. Now, a lot of you have probably seen graphs floating around the internet that show popular vote turnout way exceeding what happened in 2024 on a national scale. And that's what we're sort of looking at, and that's part and parcel of what happened in Maricopa County. And so this red line is actually voter turnout. Typically, Arizona has fairly good rates of voter turnout, runs roughly about 80%. And so, generally speaking, when you do graphs, you can do a statistical analysis. You can look at trend lines where the trend would normally be for voter registration and where a trend would normally be for voter turnout. And so this doesn't take into account, of course, population growth. For example, there was a fairly good amount of turnout here between 2012 and 2016. But at the same, or not turnout, but a voter registration increase that was under 20%. So it was just less than 20%. But at the same time, the population of the state of Arizona grew by 6 to 7%, depending upon what statistic you get. So with a 6 to 7% population increase, you would expect a pretty significant increase in voter registration. Here, going into 2020, right? 2020, that period in time we know was marred by COVID, people living in fear, people afraid to touch their mail, people afraid to go out of their house, and the government clamping down and locking down on everything except their left-wing friends who are out protesting and burning down cities and apparently engaging in voter registration activities. So what we have take place here, right? We have a slightly over 20% increase in voter registration from 2016 to 2020. The problem with that significant of an increase of voter registration, folks, is that the state of Arizona had a 2 to 3% population increase. Fairly modest population increase, and you wouldn't expect to see that huge of a ramp up of voter registration in the state of Arizona. And so this is an anomaly, folks. 2020 is an anomalous year in which voter registration exceeded the norm significantly and in which voter turnout exceeded the norm significantly. And so if you all have paid attention during the 2024 election, basically what took place in 2024 in Pennsylvania was an individual and his company were caught red-handed submitting fraudulent voter registration forms in the state of Pennsylvania, currently being investigated by 4 county attorneys in Pennsylvania and by the state's attorney in the state of Pennsylvania. What also did we learn? The day before the general election in Maricopa County, Stephen Richer gave a press conference at which he discussed somewhat these 90,000 voter registrations that were dumped on Maricopa County on the last day to register to vote. 90,000. That's a significant number of voter registrations, folks. And Stephen Richer stood up there before the camera and said, A significant number of those are related to this company in Pennsylvania that is currently under investigation for submitting fraudulent voter registration forms, folks. So this is where the key is. Voter registration, the voter registration database, coupled with mail ballots, right? If you illegally register people to vote and have a ballot directed to you or to somewhere else where you can collect that ballot and then you can vote it and inject that ballot into the system. If you know that they're not doing signature verification at the state level, basically you can swoop a whole bunch of ballots into the system. And what did we learn after the 2020 election? After Maricopa County stopped hiding chain of custody documents, is that there were 20,000 ballots that were injected into the system on the day after the election, folks. 20,000 ballots. And so we need someone strong in the federal government to help us get to the bottom of this for two reasons. One reason, it's illegal under federal law for us to learn who was engaging in this voter registration, who registered an individual voter. And two, we've got Adrian Fontes and we have Stephen Richer currently blocking any and all efforts to get access to voter registration related information, and including these blue ballot affidavit envelopes, which contain a significant amount of information aside from the voter signature, right? They include addresses, and they've got this wonderful little barcode that contains a whole host of information, and that's why we want to see these blue ballot affidavit envelopes. Because what happened in 2020 isn't isolated to 2020. In fact, I think 2022 was in large part sort of a cover-up of what took place in 2020. We can't let MAGA, get control, especially of the Attorney General's office, because then they might start to look at what's been going on and people are going to get in trouble. And so 2022, what happens? We get this AG, right? They say she won by 250 votes. She didn't win. This was election fraud that got her over the top of the hurdle. And there were no attorneys in the state of Arizona, or at least the attorney who represented the Republican candidate was just totally dysfunctional, right? He didn't bring any valid or legitimate claims in that case. It was dismissed. And of course, we wind up with what we have now. Mark Elias's attack dog. And what have they done immediately after she was sworn into office? She attacks MAGA. She does what Stephen Richer's been doing, trying to intimidate attorneys, trying to get attorneys sanctioned by the bar to keep conservative attorneys out of this election fight. And so you have the AG, she's prosecuting the Trump electors, she's prosecuting people in Cochise County for engaging in the act of representative democracy. And so essentially what you have is two election cycles here where you have pretty significant issues. The difference between 2024 is, folks, that you people in Maricopa County were activated. You were everywhere, you were ubiquitous. And so that made it very difficult for them to do any of the things that they normally do to either stymie turnout with, shitty dysfunctional machines that have been attacked because the voter registration databases we now know are online. And so there's a whole host of problems we need to look at and fix, but how do we fix these problems, folks? How do we find out who's involved in this and prosecute so that it's never done again? This involves, folks, a whole host of state, federal, and local officials who were sort of engaged in this act. At the national security level, you have Susan Spalding and I'm just going to say the NSA, the National Security Agencies, One of them being CISA, that I've spoken a lot about, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, going around censoring conservative speech, right? If you were to say something bad about a mail-in ballot on social media in the run-up to the 2020 election, boom, they would take you down. They would remove you. They would eliminate you. And we know now from further research that, Stephen Richer is part of this national security state bird. He works with a lot of these left-wing democratic organizations to teach his people about what is mis and disinformation. And he's actually tried to get a college professor fired and then sanctioned by the bar for sharing a truthful video, right? And so what's happening? We have our local government officials moving election functions away from the county recorder. Why? Are they hiding something? We have those very same local elections officials, local, elected officers who deleted data after the 2020 election. And so you have this effort then that would appear to conceal records from voters in the state of Arizona. You have this restructuring of the legislature under Montenegro. Who knows what that's about? And so you have this whole host of problems, folks. But really, what takes place? You get the national security agencies immediately upon the election of Donald Trump start wargaming how to eliminate Donald Trump, how to get rid of Donald Trump. You have the county recorder in Arizona, Adrian Fontes, is sworn in. I believe he hired the current vice mayor of Mesa, is it? Mesa or Tempe? Anyway, the current vice mayor of one of those towns to work for him, and he's the guy who created this field company that is currently under investigation in Pennsylvania for these fraudulent voter registrations. And so he worked with Adrian Fontes in this period. You have COVID run up, and you have this, you have CISA come to the fore. Censorship started before CISA through the military-industrial complex. You have CISA come to the fore that significantly ramps up the censorship. And then you have COVID, and then you have complete secrecy in our elections, and you have this anomalous result, right? We're not going to get to the bottom of this, folks, by hiring a U.S. attorney who is an insider and who has spent a career working with these individuals. We need somebody from the outside. We need somebody that's strong. We have somebody that has the will to do what needs to be done. We need somebody that has been in the fight the entire time. And I'm recommending to President-elect Donald Trump that he hire Alexander Culloden, Representative Alexander Culloden, to take on that fight, because I have been in this fight from day one, and Alexander Culloden has been in this fight since before the 2020 election. In fact, it was Representative Culloden who sued Adrian Fontes over mail-in ballots in the Arizona Supreme Court and won prior to the 2020 election. And so what we don't need is somebody that was part of the process during the period of time all of this happened, because maybe they're part of the problem. And I'm not casting aspersions on anyone. What I'm simply saying is, you develop a lot of friend relationships when you're working in these government agencies for a long period of time. And maybe we need somebody that doesn't have those strong friend relationships with the insiders, currently hiding information from the people of the state of Arizona. And with that, I say we are continuing our investigations. We will not stop. We will work tirelessly to ensure that we bring you accurate and credible information about what's taking place in your elections, what has taken place, so that you can make sure it never happens again. Peace.